I was sitting on the concrete steps outside my apartment, with 3 eviction notices in my hand, $17 left in my bank account, and my mom's medical bills sitting on my shoulders like bricks, when a black car pulled up and a man in a navy suit walked straight toward me and said, "Real calm, my name is Caleb Vaughn. I need you to pretend to be my wife for 1 week. I'll pay you $100,000. And I just stared at him, because I honestly thought it was either a scam or I was about to disappear. You know what I mean? Like nobody walks up to a broke woman with an orange, final notice taped to her door, and says, "Hey, can you be my wife for 7 days? I'll wire you 6 figures." But he wasn't joking. His hands were shaking, and his voice wasn't slick. Businessman voice, it was dad voice cracked around the edges, and that's the only reason I even listened to him at all. Here's what he told me sitting there on those ugly chipped steps like we were neighbors instead of two people who lived on different planets. He said he had a daughter, Lily, turning 5 in a week, and Lily's mom walked out when Lily was 3 months old, signed papers, no contact gone, and every birthday since then he'd managed it. He'd dodged questions like, "Where's mommy?" with stories about business trips and bad timing. But this year, Lily wasn't letting it go this year. She told all her little friends, "My mom is coming to my party." She set an extra chair at the table. She drew pictures of herself with a mom she doesn't even remember. She believes it so hard that he's terrified that if she doesn't get it, it's going to break something in her. And then he looks at me like I'm the answer to a prayer he was not brave enough to say out loud, and says, "She saw you last week. We were at the coffee shop on Maple. She pointed at you and said, 'That's her. That's my mom. That's the lady from my dreams. She's been talking about you ever since. I tracked you down because I am out of options, Mia, and I think you have a kind heart.'" And listen, I had a lot going on in that moment. Like the part where I'm basically homeless tomorrow. The part where I'm choosing between rent and keeping my mom alive. The part where I haven't slept in 2 days because I've been trying to figure out which friend I can crash with without being a burden. But then he showed me a picture of Lily, this tiny girl with big brown eyes and curly hair, smiling like sunshine. And suddenly, this whole ridiculous thing didn't feel like a hustle. It felt like an emergency, so I asked him, "What exactly are you asking me to do?" And he said, 1 week. You stay in my house. You have your own room, your own space. You don't owe me anything physical ever. You let Lily believe you're her mom who's been away on work. You show up for breakfast, bedtime, her birthday party. You give her one memory of having both parents at the same table. I give you 50,000 today, 50,000 at the end. I pay off your mom's hospital balance by end of day, and you never have to see these steps again. And I'm telling you right now, I said yes, call me whatever in the comments. If you want, call me desperate because I was, but I dare you to say no in that spot when your whole world is already burning, and someone hands you a fire extinguisher and says all you have to do is love a kid for a week. 20 minutes later, I am not sitting on a step anymore. I'm sitting in the back of a black car, watching the city get richer out the window, turning up through iron gates into a house that looks like a magazine ad, floors that shine fresh flowers, a staircase that curves like it's posing for a photo. And I'm thinking, don't touch anything. You can't afford to replace Mia. And he's walking me through this plan like it's a mission briefing. Lily thinks her mom travels for work, so I'm back from work. We will not dump mommy's home on her the second she walks in. We'll start with just, "Miss Mia is visiting." Let Lily come to me on her own. Keep everything slow so it's not weird. He's done thinking about this. He's mapped it, and then he starts telling me about Lily in a way that made me feel something I wasn't ready for, like, she's shy at first, but she's funny once she's comfy. She loves butterflies. She hides under her bed when she's scared, because that's her safe spot. Purple is her favorite color, not light. Purple, real purple. If she doesn't like you, you'll know in 30 seconds. But if she loves you, that's it. You're hers forever. And I can hear it in his voice. This is his whole life, and he's still scared he's not enough for her. When Lily finally came home from preschool, I swear the air in that house changed. I don't even know how to explain it. This tiny girl in a purple dress with a backpack covered in butterfly stickers walks in, stops dead in the doorway when she sees me, and the whole house just holds its breath. Caleb says soft, "Lily, sweetheart, this is Miss Mia. She's going to be staying with us for a little while." And Lily just stares at me like she's scanning my soul. And I'm thinking, if this kid screams stranger danger, I'm out. It's over, we tried. But instead, I crouch down and say, "Hey, Lily, did you know butterflies taste with their feet?" And she blinks and whispers, "No, they don't." And I go, "Yes, they do. They land on flowers and they go, this is yummy with their toes." And she cracks, she giggles, she steps closer, and 10 minutes later, she's in my lap, asking if caterpillars are scared when they melt into goo. And I'm answering like, this is normal for me, like, I haven't just been hired to be someone's mother for cash. And I look up, and Caleb is leaning in the doorway, watching us with this look on his face like relief and heartbreak at the same time. And that's when I realized this wasn't a game for him. This wasn't about how it looked to his friends. This was a father in survival mode doing whatever it took to hold his kid together. That first night, I read Lily her bedtime stories, turned on her little moon nightlight, tucked her in under a purple comforter that probably cost more than my old car. And right when her eyes started to close, she whispered, "Are you my mommy?" And time just stopped. Caleb went still in the doorway. I could feel the fear in the room, like heat, because this is the moment everything could snap. And I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't say yes and build that on sand. So I told her, "I'm someone who cares about you very, very much. And I'm here because I want to be here with you." And she thought about that, with her little forehead all scrunched up, and then she nodded and said, "That's good enough," and held my hand until she fell asleep. And I swear to you, that was the moment I knew I wasn't walking out of that house the same person who walked in. The next few days felt like I had stepped into some other woman's life, and somehow that life fit me better than my own ever did. Breakfast together in this ridiculous kitchen with 2 ovens while Lily sits there in pajamas and tells us her dreams, glitter-covered art sessions in the sunroom, where she shows me how to draw butterfly wings the right way, trips to the park where she yells, "Push me higher, Mia, higher, higher." And I push her so high she screams laughing. And for the first time I hear Caleb laugh like a regular man and not a CEO. And every night after Lily's in bed, it's me and him at the end of the day with tea, just talking. And I start to see past the money, past the headlines, past the perfect suit. And what I see is a man who built an empire but still blames himself because his daughter asks where mommy went, and he doesn't have an answer that doesn't hurt her, you know what I mean. And then right in the middle of me trying to keep it professional and detached, this thing happens that changes everything. He takes me to this charity gala because apparently you can't just be a fake wife in private. You have to sell it in public too. And I'm in a red silk dress his assistant brought me. He's in a tux, cameras flashing, people coming up like, "So nice to finally meet you. We've heard so much about Caleb's wife." And I'm just smiling and lying like it's my second language. Yes, I travel for work. Yes, it's so hard being away. And every time I feel my voice shake, his hand is right there on my back saying, "I've got you." And then he asks me to dance and we move slow. And it's quiet. And he looks at me like this is already real. And I feel something drop in my stomach that I did not ask for. And later that night, after Lily's asleep, and the house is soft and quiet, and we're standing in the kitchen, in that in-between hour, he tells me straight, "This stopped being a transaction for me. I'm falling for you. I don't want this to end Monday." And I panicked, like full-body panic, because I knew if I let myself want that, I was done. I told him, Don't do this. You're confusing gratitude with feelings. And he said, don't tell me what I feel. I'm asking you to consider staying not as an employee, not as a lie, but as yourself. And I couldn't even answer him because the next day was Lily's birthday and I knew what was coming. Her party was beautiful, purple and butterflies everywhere. Little kids running around the yard with wings. I helped them make face paint, a bounce house shaped like a garden, and Lily introducing me to every parent like, this is my mom. She came home for my birthday, and nobody questioned it. Everybody just smiled like, oh, that's sweet. And I wanted to freeze time right there because I knew sunset was coming with a bill. And sure enough, after the last kid left and the house got quiet again, and we were in the backyard with paper plates and ribbon all over the grass, Lily crawled into my lap and asked, we can do this again next year, right? You'll be here next year. And I had to tell her some version of the truth that I might have to leave because of work. And she just broke in my arms crying, why does everybody leave me? Why doesn't anybody stay? And that sound is going to live in my chest forever. Because you can pretend all you want in front of adults, but you can't pretend in front of a crying 5-year-old who just wants to know if love is going to disappear again. That night, after we finally got her calm and asleep, with her stuffed butterfly in one arm and my hand in the other, I went downstairs and told Caleb, we can't dodge this anymore. And he said, stay. Please just stay. Move into the guest room. We'll go slow. We'll be honest with her in a way that doesn't shatter her. I'll bring your mom here. She can have her own space. You won't have to choose between taking care of her and being here. Keep the money. I'm not buying you. I'm asking you to build a real life with us. And if at any point it doesn't feel right, we stop. All I am asking is that you don't walk out tomorrow and rip her open like that. And nobody had ever in my life said to me, you don't have to fight this by yourself anymore. We'll make room for you and your people. So yeah, I stayed. And staying turned into breakfast routines and school drop-offs, and him handing me coffee in the kitchen calling me baby without thinking, and my mom living in his house calling him son when she thought he couldn't hear, and Lily running around grocery stores telling strangers, this is my family. And one morning, 6 months later, pancakes on the stove, everybody still in pajamas. He looked at me, hands shaking, like they did that first day on my steps, and he said, Mia, I love you. Will you marry me? And I said yes before my brain even caught up, and a judge signed papers and made me Lily's legal mother. And she stood there in her little purple dress and told the courtroom in her serious 5-year-old voice, she's my real mom because she stayed. And that was it for me. So now I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody who hears this story. Was I wrong to say yes on those steps? Was he wrong to ask? Do you think family is about blood? Or do you think family is about who shows up and keeps showing up even when it's messy and scary and everybody else already left? Tell me in the comments and tell me where you're watching from, because I'm curious how many of you have seen something like this in real life and how many of you would have said yes too, because yeah, that happened.
Sir, you have to leave now. The new waitress stopped a CEO moments before a $100 million deal. What if the person who saved your life was someone you'd never met before, someone who had every reason to stay silent? In the heart of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, 42-year-old James Chen adjusted his silk tie one last time before the meeting that would change everything. The merger documents sat crisp in his leather briefcase, each page worth millions. He'd worked 15 years to reach this moment, building his tech company from a cramped garage to a global empire. The rival CEO would arrive any minute, ready to finalize the $100 million acquisition that would secure both their legacies. James had rehearsed every detail, anticipated every question. What he couldn't have predicted was the young woman in a server's apron who would approach his table with trembling hands and whisper the words that would shatter his perfect evening. Her name tag read Lucy, and her eyes held a secret that would save his life. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Lucy Martinez had been working at Le Bernardin for exactly 3 weeks, and she still felt like an imposter among the seasoned waitstaff. At 34, she was older than most new hires, but after her husband's accident left them drowning in medical bills, she needed this job desperately. The elegant dining room intimidated her with its soft lighting and hushed conversations of Manhattan's elite, but she was determined to prove herself worthy of serving here. Tonight felt different, though. The maitre d' had assigned her to Section 7, where the most important guests dined. "Just follow the usual protocols," he'd instructed, straightening his bow tie. "No mistakes tonight." Lucy nodded, checking her reflection in the polished silver service station. Her hands still shook slightly when she carried the heavy trays, but she was getting stronger each day. She watched James Chen enter the restaurant with the confidence of a man who belonged everywhere he went. His charcoal suit fit perfectly, and he moved with the purposeful stride of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Lucy had seen his photo in business magazines while waiting in her husband's hospital room, the tech mogul who'd revolutionized cloud computing before his 40th birthday. Tonight, he carried himself like a man on the verge of victory. As Lucy arranged the bread service at his table, she caught fragments of his phone conversation. "The contracts are ironclad," he was saying, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "By midnight, we'll have sealed the biggest deal in both our company's histories." He smiled as he ended the call, completely unaware that Lucy had frozen beside his table. The name he'd mentioned, Harrison Tech Industries, sent ice through her veins. 6 months ago, that same company had laid off her husband David right before his diagnosis, cutting his health insurance when they needed it most. The executives had smiled in the news interviews, talking about restructuring for efficiency, while families like hers watched their futures crumble. Lucy's grip tightened on the breadbasket as memories flooded back. David's confused face when security escorted him out, the stack of medical bills that followed, the night she'd held him while he apologized for getting sick. But tonight wasn't about her pain. Tonight, she'd overheard something that could destroy James Chen's perfect evening, and despite everything, she couldn't let it happen. The rival CEO he was meeting with had a reputation for last-minute betrayals, and Lucy had just learned something that could save James from making the biggest mistake of his life. Lucy spent the next hour watching James Chen prepare for his meeting, her heart racing with each passing minute. She refilled his water glass twice, her hands steadier than they'd been in weeks, while her mind wrestled with an impossible decision. 3 tables away, she'd recognized Robert Harrison's assistant making hushed phone calls near the restroom. Calls that mentioned backup buyers and switching at the last minute. The restaurant hummed with its usual sophisticated energy, crystal glasses chiming softly as servers moved between tables like dancers in an ancient ritual. Lucy found comfort in the routine, folding napkins, polishing silverware, arranging flowers, but her eyes kept drifting back to James. He sat alone, occasionally glancing at his watch, completely trusting that his business partner would honor their agreement. During her break, Lucy stepped into the narrow alley behind the restaurant where staff took their moments of peace. The October air was crisp against her face as she pulled out her phone and scrolled through news articles about Harrison Tech. The company had a pattern, she discovered, acquiring smaller firms only to strip them for parts, leaving hundreds unemployed. David's story wasn't unique. It was part of a deliberate strategy that destroyed lives for profit margins. She thought about her husband at home, probably asleep in his recliner with medical journals scattered around him. Since losing his job, he'd thrown himself into studying, determined to find new ways to contribute despite his limitations. His courage humbled her daily, and she knew he'd want her to do the right thing, even for a stranger. When Lucy returned to the dining room, she watched James check his phone again. His confidence had dimmed slightly, probably wondering why his meeting was running late. She noticed the way he touched his wedding ring when he was thinking, a small gesture that humanized the powerful executive. Perhaps he too had someone at home who believed in him, someone whose world would shatter if this deal went wrong. The internal debate tore at her conscience. James represented everything she resented about corporate America. The wealth, the power, the ability to make deals worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Yet he sat there trusting and vulnerable, unaware that his faith was about to be betrayed. Lucy had spent months feeling powerless against the forces that had devastated her family. Tonight, she held the power to prevent someone else's devastation. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. As the clock struck 9:30, Lucy made her decision. She smoothed her apron, steadied her breathing, and walked toward James Chen's table, knowing that the next few minutes would change both their lives forever. "Sir." Lucy's voice barely rose above a whisper as she approached James's table. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and for a moment she wondered if she'd lost her mind. What was she, a waitress drowning in debt, doing interrupting a billionaire's evening? James looked up from his phone, his expression polite but distant. "Yes. Is there something you need?" Lucy glanced around the dining room, ensuring no one else could hear. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I think you're about to be betrayed." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and James's eyebrows rose in surprise. "I beg your pardon." She knelt beside his chair, her voice urgent but controlled. "Mr. Harrison isn't coming to honor your deal. I overheard his assistant making calls about backup buyers, about pulling out at the last minute. They're planning to leave you stranded and sell to someone else." James stared at her, his mind visibly processing this information. "You're telling me that Robert Harrison, who I've known for 10 years, is planning to double-cross me based on something you overheard?" The skepticism in his voice cut deep, but Lucy understood it. She was nobody to him, just another face in the service industry that powerful people barely noticed. "I know how this sounds. I know you have no reason to trust me. But that company destroyed my husband's life, and I've learned to recognize their patterns. They did the same thing to 3 other firms this year." Something in her tone made James lean forward. "What happened to your husband?" Lucy's voice grew quiet. "Harrison Tech laid him off right before he was diagnosed with a chronic illness. Cut his health insurance. Left us with nothing." She paused, seeing recognition flicker in James's eyes. "I don't want that to happen to you, even though we're strangers. Even though your world and mine couldn't be more different." For the first time that evening, James really looked at her, not as a server, but as a person carrying her own weight of worry and hope. He saw the exhaustion around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly despite her calm voice, the strength it must have taken to approach him. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked softly. "Because everyone deserves a fighting chance," Lucy replied. "Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do." Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. James glanced at his phone again. 9:45. Harrison was now 15 minutes late, which was unusual for a man who prided himself on punctuality. Lucy's warning began to feel less impossible and more like a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. James's phone buzzed with a text message. "Running late. Start without me. Harrison." The casual dismissal in those few words suddenly felt calculated rather than courteous. Lucy watched his face change as the pieces fell into place. "He's never late," James murmured, more to himself than to Lucy. In 10 years of business together, Robert has never been late to anything important. He looked up at her with new respect. "How did you know?" Lucy pulled out her phone and showed him the news articles she'd bookmarked over the past months. Harrison Tech has done this before. They string companies along, get them to reject other offers, then pull out at the last minute when the target is most vulnerable. It's not personal, it's just business to them. James scrolled through the articles, his expression growing darker with each story. Companies that had trusted Harrison, families torn apart by sudden layoffs, executives who'd lost everything because they believed in handshake agreements. "My God," he whispered. "I turned down 3 other offers because Robert assured me we had a solid deal." "You still have time," Lucy said gently. "It's not even 10 o'clock. Those other buyers might still be interested." For a moment, James sat in stunned silence, processing how close he'd come to losing everything. His company, his employees' jobs, his own family's security. All of it had hung in the balance while he'd waited trustingly for a friend who was planning to betray him. "I need to make some calls," he said, standing abruptly. Then he paused, really looking at Lucy for the second time that evening. "Why? Why did you save me? After what happened to your husband, you had every reason to let me fall." Lucy straightened her apron, and for the first time all evening, she smiled. "Because becoming bitter doesn't heal anything. Because kindness is the only thing that grows when you give it away. My husband taught me that, even after everything he's been through." James felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years of cutthroat business dealings. "What's your name?" "Lucy Martinez." "Lucy Martinez, you just saved my company and probably my marriage. How can I ever repay you?" She was already stepping back toward the kitchen. "Just pay it forward someday. Help someone else when they need it most." If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As Lucy disappeared into the bustling kitchen, James pulled out his phone and began making the calls that would salvage his future. But even as he negotiated new deals and secured his company's survival, he couldn't stop thinking about the waitress who'd risked her job to save a stranger. 3 months later, Lucy was arranging flowers in the lobby of the David Martinez Medical Research Foundation when she heard familiar footsteps behind her. She turned to find James Chen, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, carrying a large envelope and wearing a genuine smile. "Hello, Lucy." "Mr. Chen." She wiped her hands on her jeans, suddenly conscious that she was no longer in her server's uniform. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to see the foundation David started with the grant we provided. And I wanted to thank you properly." He handed her the envelope. "The preliminary research your husband's team published last month has already attracted 3 major pharmaceutical companies. They want to fund clinical trials." Lucy's eyes filled with tears as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check that would cover David's medical expenses for the next 5 years, along with a letter offering him a position as chief researcher at James's new medical technology division. "The company that tried to destroy you ended up creating something beautiful," James said softly. "Harrison Tech went bankrupt 2 weeks ago. Turns out, betraying business partners isn't a sustainable strategy. But David's research is going to help thousands of people." "James, we can't accept this much money." "Yes, you can. And you will." His voice carried the same authority she'd heard that night at the restaurant, but now it was wrapped in warmth. "That evening, you taught me that real wealth isn't measured in deals or acquisitions. It's measured in the lives we touch and the good we do when no one's watching." Lucy walked him through the foundation's small but growing facility. They paused at David's office, where he was deep in conversation with a team of young researchers, his face animated with the passion that had first made Lucy fall in love with him years ago. "He looks happy," James observed. "He is. We both are. For the first time in years, we're not just surviving, we're building something meaningful." Lucy turned to face him. "You didn't have to do any of this." "Yes, I did. You saved my company that night, but more importantly, you saved my soul. I'd forgotten that business could be about more than profit margins and quarterly reports. You reminded me that behind every decision are real people with real lives." As they walked back to the lobby, James paused at the Foundation's mission statement etched in marble: "Healing begins when kindness meets courage." "David wrote that," Lucy said proudly. "It's perfect. And it's exactly what you showed me that night." James extended his hand for a shake, then thought better of it and pulled her into a warm hug. "Thank you, Lucy Martinez. Thank you for choosing kindness when you had every reason to choose revenge." As James left the foundation, Lucy stood in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the lobby windows. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes. Sometimes a whispered warning becomes a foundation for hope. And sometimes, choosing kindness over bitterness doesn't just heal one heart, it heals two. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope, and remember, You never know when your next act of kindness might change someone's entire world. Billionaire thought his daughter was blind, until the waitress discovered that. What if the greatest fortune in the world couldn't buy you the one thing you needed most? Robert Harrison sat across from his 8-year-old daughter Lucy in their favorite corner booth at Miller's Diner, watching her small fingers trace patterns on the worn Formica table. For 3 years, he'd been told she was blind, a devastating diagnosis that had shattered his world and changed everything about how they lived. The specialists, the treatments, the countless appointments had all confirmed the same heartbreaking truth. Yet something about this moment felt different. Lucy's head tilted slightly toward the window, and Robert could swear he saw her eyes follow the movement of a red cardinal landing on the branch outside. But that was impossible, wasn't it? The doctors had been certain. As their usual waitress approached with her warm smile and coffee pot in hand, Robert had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to change everything he thought he knew about his daughter's condition. "Where are you watching from?" Maria Hernandez had been serving coffee and comfort at Miller's Diner for 7 years, and she'd grown particularly fond of the quiet businessman who came in every Tuesday with his daughter. Robert Harrison was one of the wealthiest men in the state, but you'd never know it from his gentle demeanor or the way he patiently helped Lucy navigate her meal. The whole town knew about the little girl's blindness, how it had happened when she was 5, how her father had devoted his life to caring for her ever since her mother's passing. "Good morning, you two," Maria said, settling into the easy rhythm they'd established over months of Tuesday visits. "The usual pancakes for Miss Lucy?" She watched as the child's face lit up with that radiant smile that never failed to warm her heart. But today, something caught Maria's attention. As she poured Robert's coffee, she noticed Lucy's eyes tracking the steam rising from the cup with perfect precision. Robert had built his fortune in technology, creating software that helped visually impaired children learn. Ironically, his own daughter's condition had inspired his most successful venture. He'd thrown himself into the work after Lucy's diagnosis, partly as therapy and partly as a way to help other families facing similar challenges. The specialists at the children's hospital had been unanimous. Damage to the optic nerve from a childhood fever had left Lucy permanently blind. "Daddy, can we sit by the window today?" Lucy asked, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that made Robert's chest tighten with love and protective worry. "I like feeling the warm sunshine." He'd learned to accommodate her requests, believing they helped her navigate a world she couldn't see. What he didn't notice, but Maria did, was how Lucy's gaze lingered on the bright yellow flowers in the window box, her pupils contracting slightly in the morning light. Maria had raised 3 children of her own and had spent countless hours volunteering at the local elementary school. Something about Lucy's behavior was tugging at her memory, triggering an instinct she couldn't quite name. As she watched the child carefully avoid looking directly at her father while seeming to observe everything else in the room, a troubling possibility began to form in her mind. Could the doctors have been wrong? Over the following weeks, Maria found herself paying closer attention during the Harrisons' visits. She began to notice small things that didn't quite add up. Lucy would reach for her juice glass with startling accuracy, rarely needing the guidance her father constantly provided. When other children played in the diner's small play area, Lucy's head would turn toward their laughter with what seemed like visual awareness rather than just auditory response. Robert, meanwhile, was planning another trip to a specialist in Boston. "The research in visual rehabilitation is advancing so quickly," he confided to Maria one particularly quiet Tuesday morning while Lucy was in the restroom with the aide he'd hired to help navigate public spaces. "I keep hoping maybe there's something we missed, some treatment that might help her see again." The pain in his voice was raw and immediate, the grief of a father who'd never stopped hoping for a miracle. Maria's heart ached for him, but her growing suspicions were becoming harder to ignore. She'd started conducting small, informal tests during their visits, dropping a napkin near Lucy's chair to see if the child's eyes would follow its movement, or placing colorful objects within her field of vision. Each time, Lucy seemed to track the items before quickly looking away, as if she'd caught herself in some kind of mistake. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday in October. Lucy had been unusually animated, chattering about a story her teacher had read about autumn leaves. As Maria approached their table with a fresh pot of coffee, She watched Lucy's eyes clearly focus on the orange and red maple leaves scattered across the sidewalk outside. For a full 3 seconds, the child stared with obvious visual engagement before seeming to remember herself and turning her face away. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she poured the coffee. She'd worked with enough children to recognize the signs, and the picture forming in her mind was both wonderful and troubling. If Lucy could see, and Maria was becoming increasingly certain she could, then why was she pretending she couldn't? What could make an 8-year-old child choose to live in artificial darkness? And more importantly, how could she approach Robert with such an extraordinary possibility without causing him more pain if she was wrong? If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. The weight of her discovery felt enormous as she watched Robert gently guide his daughter's hand to her fork, unaware that Lucy had already seen exactly where it was placed. Maria struggled with her discovery for 3 sleepless nights. How do you tell a devoted father that his daughter might not need the protection he's built his entire life around? The memory of her own mother's overprotectiveness after her brother's childhood accident came flooding back. How love could sometimes become a gentle prison when fear took the wheel. On the following Tuesday, Maria made a decision that would change everything. As Robert stepped outside to take an important business call, she found herself alone with Lucy for the first time. The child sat quietly in the booth, her face turned toward the window where morning sunlight painted golden rectangles across the worn linoleum floor. "Lucy, sweetheart," Maria said softly, sliding into the booth across from her. "Can I ask you something?" She watched as the child's posture tensed almost imperceptibly. "That butterfly mobile hanging above the register, can you tell me what color it is?" The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Lucy's small hands fidgeted with her napkin, and Maria could see the internal struggle playing across her features. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, the child said, "Purple and yellow. But please don't tell Daddy." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. "Oh, honey," she breathed, her heart breaking for both father and daughter. "Why? Why are you pretending you can't see?" Lucy's eyes filled with tears that she'd clearly been holding back for months, maybe years. "Because Daddy is so sad about Mommy being gone, and when he thinks I can't see, he doesn't go to work as much. He stays home with me and reads me stories and makes me feel safe. If he knows I can see, he'll go back to working all the time like he used to, and I'll be alone again." The devastating logic of a child's love nearly brought Maria to her knees. In Lucy's 8-year-old mind, her blindness had become the thread holding her fractured family together. She'd sacrificed her own freedom to movement and independence because she was terrified of losing the one parent she had left. "Sweetheart, your daddy loves you whether you can see or not," Maria said gently. "But living this way isn't fair to either of you." She could see Robert through the window, pacing as he talked on his phone, probably discussing another medical consultation or adaptive technology for his daughter. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. The weight of the truth felt overwhelming as Maria realized she was holding the key to unlocking 2 lives that had been trapped in loving but misguided protection. When Robert returned to the table, he immediately sensed the change in atmosphere. Lucy was wiping her eyes, and Maria was holding the child's hand with the tenderness of a grandmother. "Is everything all right?" he asked, sliding back into the booth with the protective alertness of a father who'd learned to read every shift in his daughter's emotional weather. Maria took a deep breath, knowing this moment would either heal or devastate the man sitting across from her. "Robert, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen with an open heart." She looked at Lucy, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. "Lucy can see. She's been able to see all along." The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Robert's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning hope so fragile it was painful to witness. "That's impossible," he whispered. "The doctors, the tests, the scans." "Daddy," Lucy's small voice cut through his denial like a bell. She looked directly into his eyes for the first time in 3 years, her gaze clear and focused and filled with love. "I can see you. I can see how much you love me, and I can see how sad you are without Mommy. I just wanted to keep you close." Robert's world tilted on its axis. Every careful routine they'd built, every accommodation he'd made, every sleepless night he'd spent researching treatments, all of it had been built on a foundation of misunderstanding. But as he stared into his daughter's seeing eyes, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: pure, uncomplicated joy. The original diagnosis was wrong, Maria explained gently. Sometimes childhood illnesses can cause temporary vision problems that resolve on their own. Lucy probably started seeing clearly again months or even years ago, but she was afraid to tell you. Robert reached across the table and took his daughter's hands in his own. Lucy, sweetheart, I love you no matter what. Being with you isn't a burden, it's the greatest privilege of my life. You never have to pretend to need me. I'll always choose you, no matter what. The tears came then, washing away 3 years of unnecessary fear and limitation. Other customers in the diner began to notice the emotional scene, but Maria quietly moved to give them privacy while keeping watch over this moment of transformation. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. The healing had begun, but the real work of rebuilding their relationship based on truth rather than perceived need was just starting. 6 months later, Miller's diner buzzed with the familiar warmth of a Tuesday morning, but everything had changed for the better. Lucy burst through the front door with the boundless energy of a child who'd been freed from invisible chains, her eyes bright with curiosity and mischief. She raced to their usual booth, where Maria was already waiting with hot chocolate topped with extra marshmallows, a celebration tradition they'd maintained since that life-changing morning. Robert followed more slowly, but his step was lighter now, his smile genuine in a way it hadn't been since his wife's passing. The months since Lucy's revelation had been a journey of rediscovery for both of them. They'd returned to all the specialists, finally getting proper examinations that confirmed what Maria had suspected. Lucy's vision had returned gradually over time, likely due to the natural healing process that sometimes occurs after childhood fevers. The original diagnosis had been based on tests conducted during the acute phase of her illness, when temporary swelling had indeed blocked her vision. "Maria!" Lucy called out, sliding into the booth with practiced ease. "Guess what? Daddy's teaching me to drive the golf cart at our house, and I can see everything: the trees, the pond, even the deer that come to drink water in the morning." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Maria felt her heart swell with joy at the transformation. Robert had made changes too. He'd restructured his business to allow for more flexible hours, but this time it was a choice made from love rather than obligation. He'd learned that being present didn't require emergency circumstances, it required intention. His foundation for visually impaired children had expanded significantly, partly funded by his own donations and driven by a deeper understanding of both the challenges and the resilience of families facing such difficulties. "You know," Maria said, refilling Robert's coffee cup, "watching you two has taught me something important about love. Sometimes we think protecting someone means limiting their world, but real love is about giving them the freedom to grow while knowing you'll always be there to catch them." Lucy looked up from her hot chocolate, marshmallow foam on her upper lip. "Maria, Daddy says you're our guardian angel. Is that true?" The innocent question brought tears to Maria's eyes, but they were tears of gratitude for being part of this beautiful story of healing. As they prepared to leave, Robert pressed an envelope into Maria's hands. Inside was a scholarship fund he'd established for her daughter's college education, along with a note that simply read, "Thank you for seeing what love looks like when it's brave enough to tell the truth." The autumn sunlight streamed through Miller's diner windows as Lucy skipped toward the door, turning back to wave goodbye with eyes that sparkled with all the wonder of a child who could finally see her world clearly. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one. Sometimes the greatest miracles aren't about magical healing, they're about having the courage to see what was there all along, and the wisdom to know that love grows stronger when it's built on truth rather than fear.
I was standing in sideways rain, with a suitcase that wouldn't stay shut, mascara leaking down my cheeks, when the Whitlock front door clicked in that polite hotel way that says you're officially on the outside. Vivian's last words hung under the portico like a chandelier icicle. "You are not what our son needs. Marin best to step away indefinitely." And I was trying not to vomit on the marble when the sky started humming. Not thunder, deeper, steadier. Then the clouds split, and a midnight blue jet with a silver tail number I knew by heart dropped through the mist, and I thought, God, my father, yeah, that happened. I hadn't spoken to Martin Rowe in almost 3 years. We'd fought about love and respect, and which one holds the other up. I chose love and ran fast. He chose respect and stood still. And yet there he was, walking through the rain without an umbrella coat, unbuttoned, face calm in that way that makes wind behave. He put the gray wool on my shoulders and said my name like a full sentence. Marin. Then quiet as a verdict, no one humiliates my daughter and walks away untouched. His hand was warm, I finally breathed. If you need the backstory, you can have it quick and true. I met Colin in a coffee line. He remembered my order. He laughed with that soft laugh people use when they were raised around too many hard ones. I believed him when he said his family would love me once they knew me. You know what I mean? Hope makes a good lawyer. The Whitlock place at Waverly Cove looked like a museum that had decided to have children. Chandeliers with more zeros than my student loans. A lawn you could get lost on. I wore my mom's pearl studs to the wedding because they felt like permission. After the toasts, Vivian leaned in with the kind of perfume that sounds expensive and called me tidy, tidy like a drawer. I laughed because what else do you do when the person who basically owns your Sundays calls you tidy? Colin squeezed my fingers under the table and whispered, "They'll come around. We'll take it slow." So I did. I set flowers where no one would notice, wrote thank you notes to housekeepers and tucked them under folded towels, sipped coffee at dawn in the back garden, where the wind didn't care who I married, and at dinner I learned how to disappear politely. The table so long it needed a map. Richard talked bonds and golf trips that smelled like elections, Sloane perfected. Compliment as slap. "Your dress is so actual," she said. And I spent a small midnight Googling what that meant when I tried to add a story from my mom's diner. The conversation paused 2 beats, then started again, 3 chairs down, without me like a train that doesn't stop at small stations. The first crack was the day I brought tea into the sitting room, trying to be useful to a place that didn't need me, I heard Vivian say. She's a Project Thrift Store kind, and Colin, the man I loved, said, "Not she's my wife, not you're out of line, just let's not do this now," and that hurt. In a way you feel in your teeth, then came the spring gala where money puts on a tux and pretends to be philanthropy. I wore a rose dress I'd saved for not designer, but it fit my ribs, and that felt like a win. The light liked me for a second. Then Vivian took the mic, and with that perfect charity voice thanked those who truly belong here. She looked at me like a person notes a stain before flagging down a waiter. A ripple of polite laughter went around the room. I looked at Colin, and his jaw was tight, but his mouth stayed shut in a lemon polish hallway. She suggested a break for the house if you're uncomfortable, dear. Give us some quiet, she added indefinitely. Like a surgeon says, we got it all, and I went upstairs, picked up the suitcase I had packed 2 weeks earlier, because my gut is rude but not wrong, and I stepped into rain. That's where the jet found me, where my father put his coat on me and called the cars up the drive. The gate opened like it owed him money. The stone steps filled with bodies who had paid for valet elsewhere. Vivian carried her smile like a tray. Richard adjusted cufflinks as if they were going to testify. Colin stood behind them with rain in his hair and a face I still loved and didn't recognize my father. Let the silence do the shouting. You put my daughter in a storm and mocked her, he said. You forgot your own house could be small then. He looked to his assistant, and the waterproof folder came forward, paper that had held the Whitlocks up more than any column out front. North Star Row Ventures had underwritten 3 of their developments, held their revolving credit on the marina project, bridged the retrofit downtown, brokered distribution. On that shiny home brand they bragged about. All relationships, all paper and paper. Burns fast when the right person says the word. As of now, he said it's over. Termination. Notices have already gone out. We'll protect subcontractors and workers, because they are not. The mistake here, you will learn what it costs to put cruelty over character. The crowd made a sound that rain couldn't swallow. Vivian stared like she could bargain with bone. Richard went pale in the way very tan men go pale, and Colin tried a step forward. Sir, I didn't mean for, and my father not unkind, just exact, said. You stood still, that is a meaning. The folder hit marble with a flat thud. I will hear in my sleep for years. Vivian's knees touched stone with a precision that looked practiced. Please, she said, not the queen voice now. A person voice, don't ruin us. And I stepped closer, because I wanted my words to land where they belonged. You didn't ruin my marriage, I said. You ruined what could have made us family. You don't get that back with please. Sloane stared like she was trying to locate where I'd kept the audacity. Richard muttered to a man who was definitely a lawyer and definitely not a magician. Colin said my name, and inside it I heard 1,000 small good days, and all the times he hadn't used it. When it mattered, I got in the car, heels steady on slick stone, and we left. The next morning at my father's place, the light came in clean. His house on the bluff is glass and honest wood, and nothing that begs to be admired. He knocked like a guest and brought coffee with honey, not sugar, because he remembers the things that matter. He didn't say, I told you so, he said. I waited for you to remember what you already are in the afternoon. He pulled me into the room that smells like cedar and maps. A stack of papers on the desk. A photo of my mother holding up a pie, like a trophy. The foundation arm is yours, he said. We'll put capital where it counts, and you will decide what that means. I started to dance the I'm not ready dance, and he stopped me with a hand and a line that landed. You kept your kindness in a place designed to steal it. That's the qualification. You know what I mean? Compassion is heavy, but it's the right kind of heavy. The news did what the news does, embattled Whitlock Group, drone shots of the mansion, like a nature documentary, studying an endangered species of arrogance. Cameras catching Vivian's hand blocking a lens, Colin clutching a folder he didn't open, my phone filled with apology texts from numbers that had never once sent a birthday message. I posted nothing. I went to work. We built grants for legal aid, created a fund for sudden exits, because not everybody has a midnight blue jet on call. I sat in small rooms and told women the thing I'm still learning in my own bones. You do not owe anyone a version of yourself that fits their furniture. 2 months later by the marina. I saw Colin by the railing watching gulls bully a bag of chips. He looked thinner in the way that makes you stop being mad long enough to be human, he said. My name, and it didn't drag 1,000 memories behind it. It just sat there. Can I say one thing, he asked. You can say one thing. I said I should have been loud for you, he said. I thought keeping the peace was love. It was just keeping my place. I let the silence stand between us, because sometimes that's the only boundary that works. I hope you find courage that doesn't need an audience, I said. Then I left. He didn't follow. The gulls took the chips and won the day. That night on my father's deck, he handed me a bowl of peach ice cream. I swear, tastes like my mother's, on its best days. Peace offering, he said. And we watched the water turn that almost purple no phone can hold. When life shoves you into the rain, he told me. It isn't always punishment. Sometimes it walks you to a door you would never find in good weather. I slept with the window open. The house breathed, and maybe that sounds dramatic, maybe it's exactly true. So here I am, not tidy, not a project, not the softest thing in a room, trying not to leave a mark. I am my mother's daughter, who can name every pie, and my father's daughter, who can look a storm in the face and say, I've met worse. I'm also the woman who walked away from marble and didn't shrink. The jet still lands sometimes. Not for rescue, for work, we fly where the foundation can move a needle, and not just write a check. I come home, stand on the deck, and ask the same question. I'll ask you, did my father do the right thing, pulling those deals, or did he go too far? Should I ever sit down with Colin for a real talk? Or is silence the line that keeps dignity intact? And what fancy bullying have you seen dressed up as tradition? Drop it in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Push back if you disagree. Because if you've ever been told you don't belong and decided to belong to yourself instead, then yeah, you know exactly what I mean.